My name's Ethan. I'm 35, an architect by trade. And until recently, I thought I had it all. A steady career, a cozy home, and a wife I adored with every piece of my heart. Her name was Lauren. We'd been married for 6 years. 6 years of shared coffee mugs, Sunday pancakes, lazy afternoon drives, and inside jokes that only made sense to us. It wasn't a fairy tale, no. It was real, grounded, built on routines, the kind that become invisible until something shakes them. Every Friday was pizza night. We'd argue about what to watch. She always wanted thrillers, I was more of a comedy guy, and somehow we'd settle on the same thing we watched last week. It was predictable, comfortable, and I loved it. I thought she did too. I used to brag, quietly, to myself, that I'd married my best friend. Someone who made laundry folding feel like a shared ritual instead of a chore. Someone who'd sit on the kitchen counter while I cooked, sipping wine, talking about nonsense. That kind of closeness doesn't come from grand gestures. It's the small things that build a life. But small cracks don't make noise at first. They show up silently. It started with her phone. Lauren was never glued to it before. She used to leave it lying around, unlocked. Suddenly, it was always in her pocket. Face down. Muted. I noticed, of course. But I brushed it off. I trusted her. I had no reason not to. Then came the books. Podcasts. Half-baked philosophies about growth and self-discovery. She'd quote them at dinner. Lines about how traditional marriage was limiting, about how we shouldn't be afraid to challenge what's normal. At first, I thought it was just a phase. You know, like when someone gets into yoga for 2 weeks and then never rolls out the mat again. I didn't realize it was the beginning of the end. One night, while we were doing the dishes, she asked me, casually, like she was asking about the weather, "Ethan, have you ever thought that maybe people stop growing in relationships because they get too comfortable?" I laughed. I thought she was being philosophical. "No," I said. "I think comfort's the whole point. It means we're safe. Together." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Looking back now, that was the moment. That tiny fracture in her tone. I didn't see it then. I didn't want to. It's strange how, in hindsight, the signs were everywhere, loud and blinking, like caution lights before a cliff. But when you love someone, you don't see the edge. You just keep driving. Lauren started dressing differently. Not dramatically, just upgraded. Nicer blouses, heels instead of flats. Makeup on days she used to wear none. She even started wearing that perfume she used to save for anniversaries. Now she wore it to work on Wednesdays. I joked once, trying to win Employee of the Month. She smiled. "Just want to feel good about myself." I didn't question it. Why would I? But then she stopped talking about her day. She used to come home with stories, little things about her boss being ridiculous or someone microwaving fish in the break room again. But now, her answers were short, vague. Just another busy day. Or, nothing worth talking about. And then came Mason. She said he was just a coworker. Just a guy who worked a few desks down and happened to share her love for photography and cold brew coffee. I didn't think much of it until she started quoting him. Mason thinks traditional marriage is a construct we cling to out of fear. Mason says people only grow when they leave their comfort zones. At first, it was once in a while. Then it was almost every conversation. I remember asking her one night, "Are you sure Mason's wife's cool with all his enlightened theories?" She looked irritated. Mason's marriage is very open. They believe in honest, emotional freedom. I said nothing. But inside, something shifted. The woman who used to fall asleep on the couch halfway through a movie was now working late 3 times a week. Her phone buzzed more than usual. At dinner, during shows, even in bed. If I so much as looked toward the screen, she'd flip it over, like it was some kind of reflex. One night, I couldn't help myself. I asked, "Is everything okay? You've just seemed distant." She touched my hand and gave me a look, soft, but not quite sincere. "Of course. Just work stress. You know how it gets." Except I didn't. Not like this. That night, she fell asleep beside me, like nothing was wrong. But I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering when the woman I knew turned into a stranger with secrets. I didn't have proof. Not yet. But I had a sinking feeling in my gut that the truth was coming, whether I wanted to face it or not. The night I found the truth wasn't dramatic. No lightning, no slamming doors. It was quiet. Too quiet. Lauren was in the shower. Her phone, the one that never left her side, buzzed on the nightstand. And for once, she hadn't brought it into the bathroom. I stared at it. I wasn't a snoop. I never had been. But love has a way of making you blind, and suspicion has a way of sharpening your sight. I told myself I wouldn't open it unless I saw his name. Buzz. There it was. Mason. I don't even remember unlocking it. My hands moved before my conscience could catch up. The message on the screen made my heart stop. Friday was everything. I still taste you. I kept reading. Wish you could have stayed longer. Let's be more careful. I think he's starting to suspect. Each line hit like a punch to the ribs. So it was real. Not just emotional. Not just flirtation. Physical. Intimate. Planned. She had brought him into our marriage like he belonged. Like I didn't matter. And all the while, she sat across from me every night, kissed me goodbye every morning, told me she loved me, with his words still fresh on her tongue. I didn't scream. I didn't throw her phone. I took screenshots. Every single message. Then I put the phone back exactly where I found it, sat down on the edge of the bed, and felt everything inside me harden. The woman I loved had buried our marriage under layers of lies, and now I was going to dig us both out. But not for her. For me. Because if Lauren thought I was going to break quietly, she was about to see a side of me she'd never met before. I didn't say anything that night. Not a word. Lauren came out of the bathroom, towel-wrapped and humming some mindless tune. She gave me that same little smile she always did. I smiled back. My face said husband, but my mind was already executor. Of a plan. Over the next few days, I played the role she thought I still was: quiet, clueless, safe. Meanwhile, I was collecting every detail. Every lie. Every time she said, working late. Every time her phone buzzed and she pretended not to hear it. I began to dig into Mason too. He wasn't just a coworker. He was married. Had 2 kids. And from what I gathered, a long track record of inspiring self-discovery in women at the office. Real charmer. Real predator. The kind of man who wore vulnerability like cologne and left destruction behind him like a signature scent. But here's the thing, Lauren wasn't some helpless victim. She chose this. Repeatedly. Willingly. She let him invade our life like it was a right. And now, it was time for me to reclaim what was mine. The next Friday, she told me she'd be out late. Some project deadline. I smiled and kissed her on the cheek. I'll save you some dinner, I said, with the same voice I'd used for years. She left. No suspicion. But while she was out playing her little game with Mason, I was setting the stage for the ending she never saw coming. I reached out to a friend of hers, someone Lauren didn't know I still talked to. Her name was Vanessa, and she'd always been blunt about not liking Mason. I told her what I'd found. The screenshots. The late-night texts. The lies. Her response? Finally. I've been waiting for you to figure it out. Tell me what you need. I told her the plan. We were going to turn their little fantasy into a wake-up call, one Lauren would never forget. That Friday night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I'd made sure of it. No dinner on the stove. No music playing. Just the soft hum of the fridge and the ticking clock over the fireplace. It was the kind of silence that waits to be broken. Lauren came home around 10:30 p.m. She was wearing lipstick she didn't leave with. Her heels clicked across the hardwood like punctuation marks to a sentence she hadn't written yet. When she opened the door and saw me sitting on the couch, lights low, folder in hand, her smile flickered. Hey, she said cautiously. You're still up? Yeah, I said. Didn't want to miss our big night. She blinked. Big night? Sit down, I said, motioning to the chair across from me. We need to talk. That was the moment. The flicker in her eyes. The shift in her breathing. The way her hand tightened around the strap of her bag. She knew, but she sat anyway. Slowly. Like someone approaching a cliff in the dark. I placed the folder on the coffee table and opened it. Screenshots. Printed messages. Mason's smarmy little affirmations. Her late-night confessions. Every single one. Lauren's face drained of color. I can explain. Can you? I interrupted. Because I've got a whole evening cleared for just that. She reached for the papers. I didn't let her. Let me read it back to you, I said coldly. Can't stop thinking about Friday. I already miss you. Or how about, we should be more careful. Don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I looked up. Tell me, Lauren, what exactly is the right idea here? Her eyes welled up. It didn't mean, Stop, I said, my voice flat. You don't get to cry now. You don't get to play the victim. You made your choice. She was shaking. It was a mistake. I was confused. I thought we were drifting apart. No, I said. You didn't think. You just wanted more. And you used all that relationship growth talk as cover. You took something simple and sacred and stomped on it because you were bored. She looked down, her voice barely audible. I didn't think you'd find out. That was the most honest thing she'd said all night. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and came back with a second folder. This one had divorce papers. I'm not yelling. I'm not throwing anything. I'm not even asking questions anymore, I said, placing the folder in her lap. I'm just done. She clutched the folder like it burned her hands. You don't mean this, she whispered. I laughed. Not bitter, clean. Like a final breath after being underwater too long. I've never meant anything more in my life. Lauren didn't leave right away. She sat there for a few minutes, trying to hold herself together, clutching that folder like it might rewrite the past. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. And eventually, she stood, walked upstairs, and quietly packed a bag. She left without another word. But while she was gone, I wasn't done. Because Mason? He wasn't just some idiot coworker. He was a serial manipulator. And I was going to make sure he didn't get away with it. The next day, I called someone Lauren had always been wary of. Her colleague, Heather. Sharp, driven, didn't fall for anyone's charm, and more importantly, she'd once told me, after a company Christmas party, you should keep an eye on Mason. He's got a pattern. I gave her a call. Hey, it's Daniel. I need to ask you something. Off the record. There was a pause. Then she said, it's about Mason, isn't it? That was all I needed. Within 24 hours, I had a string of contacts. Women who had worked with Mason and left, or been pushed out after things got complicated. A few were reluctant. Most were angry. One had already tried to report him but said HR swept it under the rug. This time, though, there was a paper trail. With Heather's help, I compiled it. Messages, screenshots, patterns of behavior, whispered office rumors confirmed in writing. Lauren wasn't his first. She wasn't even his second. He targeted women going through phases, told them they were special, that their husbands didn't understand them, that he was different. But Mason had a pattern, and now he had a problem. Because I wasn't going to HR. I went to corporate legal. Heather walked the file in herself. It took 2 weeks. Quiet meetings. Internal reviews. And then, Mason was gone. Fired. Disgraced. And suddenly not so smug when he realized the women he mentored had receipts. As for Lauren, she found out the same day. Probably from Mason himself. She texted me that night. Just one sentence. You ruined his life. I stared at that message for a full minute. Then I replied. No, Lauren, you both did that. I just turned the lights on. She didn't respond. She never would again. The morning after Mason was fired, everything was quiet. No messages. No drama. Just stillness. It was the first time in months I hadn't woken up with a pit in my stomach or a question burning in my chest. Lauren was gone. Mason was exposed. And me? I was still standing. I made coffee the way I used to before the chaos, slow, unrushed, no shaking hands. I sat on the porch, let the sun hit my face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I actually breathed. Not shallow, not distracted, just breathed. Of course, there were still things to wrap up, papers to sign, accounts to close. But the emotional war? That was over. Lauren never reached out again after that last text. I heard she moved back in with her sister. She'd lost her job too, collateral fallout. Apparently, once HR started pulling threads, they found enough to let her go quietly. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just let it end. And in that space, in that silence, something new began. Heather, that Heather, we stayed in touch. At first, it was practical. Updates about the Mason case. Loose ends. But then it turned into something else. One day, she called to ask if I'd seen the latest company memo about ethics policy changes. I said no, but offered to meet for coffee to hear all about it. That coffee turned into 2 hours. Then another meeting. Then dinner. I'm not saying it turned into a love story, at least not yet. But what I can say is that sitting across from someone who saw through the lies, who didn't need to be convinced of my worth, that felt like hope. And hope, after everything, is a powerful thing. I don't know what comes next, but I know what I've walked away from. A marriage built on illusions. A wife who wanted freedom more than trust. And a coworker who mistook manipulation for power. They're behind me now. Ahead of me? A life that's mine again. Uncompromised. Unapologetic. And finally, real.